All right, we are ready to move on to step 6 of the pattern, which is on page 7 of the printed pattern. This are the shoulder straps. This is an optional step. You don't need to do it if you don't want to. I have taken my piece of fabric, folded it in half, stitched along the side, turned it right side out, and pressed it. I've got the seam in the center. And I have taken that same piece and threaded it through a 1-inch D-ring. I've marked the center of the top and bottom of my bag side pieces, and I am just going to line up this with the center like so, and I'm going to stitch in between these two lines. I'm going to go ahead and stitch that across, and I'll probably stitch it more than once. After you sew this, I recommend you still keep it pinned down, because as we go the next steps to assemble the bag, you don't want this metal ring getting caught anywhere on your stitching. Okay, we are ready to assemble the bag. So just to review, you've got 2 bag side pocket pieces and you've got your bag piece. So to start, we're going to turn this bag piece lining side out. We are also going to come in and unzip the zipper, like so. If you miss any of these steps, they start with step 7. I definitely recommend following along in case, have the pattern printed out next to you in case you forget a step or just aren't sure what to pin where. There are a couple of ways to pin this. You can pin it. You can also use jumbo binding clips. It's up to you, and mostly what you have on hand at your house. All right, so right side's facing. So this is the right side of the bag. This is the right side of the pocket. And let me zoom out just a hair so you guys can see a little better. All right, so I know this is the top center, and I know this is the center, and then I know this is my bottom center seam, and I know that's my bottom center seam. So I'm going to start lining up that way. I mentioned using binding clips for this step. I prefer the binding clips mostly because I notice when I'm sewing things like this in a circle that I have a tendency to poke myself because there's just so many pins everywhere and so many pin ends that I just can't seem to not end up stabbing myself with the pins. So I like to use the clips, but use whatever you have on hand or whatever it is you're comfortable with. It doesn't matter. All right, so that is pinned and clipped. So I did both sides. You guys can see both ways. Now, you may be wondering, how do I know where to sew this? Well, that's why we have this basting stitch. So this basting stitch, you know that all of the layers are lined up inside that basting, like everything is laying flat. So you're not going to miss anything. So what I do is I come in and I sew just on the inside of that basting stitch, and it ends up with almost like a perfect seam allowance almost every time. And I think people like it because you have a visual of where to sew. So you're just going to keep using that same guide as you go. So we're going to take this over to the machine and sew it. All right, I hope I've got this where you can see it. Sometimes the camera does funny things with focusing, so I'm going to do my best with this. All right, so this is a bulky part of the job. There's just no way around it. But once you're done, you're done. So regular stitch length on the machine. You can start anywhere you want. And just get that under the presser foot there. If your machine has a hard time with these layers, you can try using a walking foot. I use a walking foot almost all the time when I sew bags because it helps feed all the layers together really well. All right, that's done. So what you want to do is come in and check and make sure you don't have any big spots like this. I will probably go in and unpick that seam and smush that down so it's a little straighter. And just make sure you caught everything, that there's no puckers. I thought that might have been a pucker, but that is not a pucker. Looks like maybe I've just got my seam a little, yeah, there is a pucker. So I'll go ahead and remove this little part of the seam and just go and check it all, make sure it's okay. Take a second and also check from the inside that everything is straight. If a little bit of your zigzag stitch is showing, that's okay because you're going to remove that. And go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. All right, the sides of my bag are sewn. I have double checked for puckers. Hopefully I have all of them out. We'll find out when I turn it right side out. Since we zigzagged these seams as we went, I don't finish these seams anymore. I leave them like this because they get tucked into this bag and you don't even see them. But if you're somebody that you're like, nope, I'm not doing that. That is not a big deal at all. There are instructions on the pattern to go ahead and finish the edge of this with bias tape. So I won't do it, but you can kind of see how that would look if you used a little bit of bias tape on the inside there. All right, moment of truth. You're turning the bag right side out. All right, now I like to take I think it's called a point turner, hair tool, something with a pokey edge. And I come in here and I put this little straight edge right in that seam to poke it out. Just like that. Now, I'm going to sit down and I'll spend a few minutes doing that because it will make a big difference with the finish of the outside bag because you want this edge to be nice and crisp. So you can see how as I kind of manipulate that, how much nicer it starts to look compared to the other side. But that's what's so nice about using the flex foam too, is it really holds its shape really well and gives you a really nice finished outside of your bag. Now, the last thing you need to do is make the shoulder strap, which I'll go over briefly. But also, you'll notice this is it got a little misshapen. So what I like to do is usually use a sleeve board or a pressing ham and a lot of steam. And I'll take this over to my iron and I will press and steam until I get it the shape I want. You can also, since this one's so small, you could stuff a pillow in here and steam it, and then that will help it hold its shape as well. All right, we are ready to finish up the bag. The very last thing to do is make the optional shoulder strap if that's something that you want for your bag. Just take the piece of webbing and I first finished the end of it with freight check and I waited for that to dry. After I finished it with freight check, I zigzagged the end and you can see I've definitely got some little stray threads I need to trim off there. Then you're just going to take your swivel hook. It's really simple. Feed it through and I usually just use a clip or a pin just to hold it in place. On the pattern, it notes recommended shoulder strap sizes for the bags, so you can use those, or if you're taller or shorter, you can test it yourself. It's just one piece of webbing, so it's pretty straightforward as far as the measurements go. And then the last thing you're going to do is you're going to sew right along with a straight stitch right along the edge of that zigzag, and then again a 1/4 inch up, making sure that you back stitch each time at the start and end of each seam. And I've used darker thread for this. I think it looks nicer. So here you can see how I have finished that. And that is the last step. All you need to do is, then they just very easily just attach to those little rings on the bag. I hope that you have enjoyed this sew along and that you enjoy your Saturday duffel bags. I would love for you to subscribe to our channel so you can be notified anytime we have new tutorials or sew alongs and quilt alongs to share. And if you loved this, I would also really appreciate it if you shared it with your friends.